In mobile technology, it's the same thing over and over. New device comes out, new device gets reviewed, new device gets forgotten. Almost no one follows up, no one follows along, no one sticks around to see how well a gadget ages over time, because there's always something new to drool over. So let's do something about it. Let's take another look at one of the most polarizing Google phones ever. I'm Michael Fisher, this is the Nexus 6, and this is episode 46 of After the Buzz. In retrospect, the Nexus 6 seemed to define an upper level of acceptability for huge phones in the mainstream. Like Captain Picard, consumers seem to say, "This far, no farther." I very much doubt we'll see many more gigantic phones like this hit the mainstream. And not much on the hardware side has changed in the 7 months since we reviewed it, aside from a problem with the back covers peeling off on some devices, which is a shame on such a pricey phone. It's still the hulking mass in the hand, the dense anchor in the pocket. No smartphone launched into wide availability since has even come close to this phone's displacement. If it were a ship, it'd be an ultra-large crude carrier, the physical manifestation of the human preoccupation with size. I'm not one for skinny jeans, but on an article of clothing with even slightly below average pocket size, well, the thing takes up some space. To understand the downside of this kind of scale, just try using the Nexus 6 with one hand. Open any app that puts its back arrow or context menu in the upper left corner of the screen, and use your right hand to try selecting it. Evernote's a good example because saving a note requires you to use that function and not Android's back key at the bottom. Same with Google Docs. Use the phone one-handed enough, and you might come close enough to dropping it to make you want a protective case, which will, of course, only make the thing bigger. Fortunately, the upside of oversized is still pretty cool. There's so much more acreage on this nearly 6-inch display. I tend to stick with a fairly minimal home screen, but there's enough area here to go pretty information-dense if you want to. You've got space to spread out on a keyboard, sharing photos with parents won't instantly make them dive for their glasses, and of course, watching movies or gaming is much more immersive. Oh, and I still have yet to use another smartphone with front-firing speakers this loud. The HTC One M9 delivers more nuance, yes, but in terms of sheer amplitude, the Nexus 6 blows it away. Internally, the Nexus 6 has aged quite well. The Snapdragon 805 within might have seemed a little long in the tooth by now, were it not for the thermal troubles attributed to its successor. As things stand, the 805 seems just dandy, and it continues to perform well with the help of 3 gigs of RAM. Kudos to Google for future-proofing in this regard. Ditto on the wireless charging, which is a much bigger deal nowadays thanks to Samsung making so much noise about it on the Galaxy S6. On the whole, the Nexus 6 hardware holds up nicely. And so does the software. Finally. It was a bumpy road getting there, though. As we've said a few times before, Android 5.0 was no picnic, even on the capable hardware of the Nexus 6. Fortunately, 5.1 has ironed out most of those initial stumbles, and our early experiments with Android M on this monster are promising. Still, I'd sure like to see Google take inspiration from Apple's reachability, as Microsoft recently did for Windows 10 Mobile. Also, it'd be great to see multi-window multitasking finally added to stock Android, or at least smart use of multi-column views when you switch to landscape in certain apps. A big screen like this just feels wasted if you can't take full advantage of it. Motorola did liberally borrow from itself here. It adapted the always-listening voice command feature of the Moto X for the Nexus 6, and being able to trigger it with the screen off is still a very nice convenience. Ambient display is another Moto X transplant, but this one never really worked as elegantly or reliably as it did on the smaller phone, and updates haven't really changed that. The camera remains largely the same as well, which is to say, it's okay. Just looking at the end result might lead you to believe it's above average. You can really get some pretty nice shots out of this thing, given the right lighting, and the 13-megapixel image size means you can do a little digital zoom, too, without losing too much detail. And though the selfies are only 2 megapixel, they're also fairly good. The problem is the process of taking a picture. Once again, the phone's size plays against it. The lock screen camera shortcut is tough to hit with a thumb, and that problem only gets worse if you're rushing to get a shot. The Google Camera app has gotten some updates to be faster in HDR mode, but it's still laggy at points and it's very slow to focus, meaning you'll be retaking a lot of photos and asking people to restrike a pose pretty often. And the focus drift remains in camcorder mode too, which makes for frustratingly blurry videos. So, even though the camera's capable of some really nice output, it's not the most fun smartphone to shoot with. Fortunately, the Nexus 6 does give you plenty of time to try to get that perfect shot because its battery is well and truly huge. Sure, we've seen bigger power packs since, but they're few and far between. No, Google doesn't pay me to say this, but my favorite new game is Ingress, which, between keeping the screen and GPS on all the time, is a real power sucker. I can still play it for hours and hours with the Nexus 6 before recharging, and more conventional use usually gets me about 5 hours of screen on time between charges. Now, we were disappointed with that performance in the review, and to be honest, that figure should still be higher with a battery this huge. I still miss the 10-hour screen on time I got out of last summer's Huawei Ascend Mate 2. But given the super high-resolution display here, we can sort of forgive that, especially considering the abysmal battery life of some of the recent competition. Probably the area this phone has aged the most is in terms of its positioning, its price. With increasingly capable offerings at ever cheaper price points, the market has changed around the Nexus 6. A recent round of discounts has helped, but it's still not as affordable as previous Nexus offerings, which is still an issue for some people. Combine that with a size that turns some consumers off, and you can see why certain folks are stoked about the rumors of a Nexus 5 resurrection/sequel this coming fall, a smaller, simpler, and probably cheaper handset. A Nexus phablet might have been inevitable in some respects, but it's definitely an acquired taste. The thing about acquired tastes is that sometimes, once you acquire them, it's tough to go back to anything else. Thanks to AT&T, we've had a Nexus 6 loaner at the Pocketnow offices for a while, and between review devices, I keep coming back to it. As weird as Lollipop can be, as inconsistent as the camera is, and as clunky as the hardware can feel at times, some things about the Nexus 6 are just really alluring. As long as you've got two hands available, it's comfortable to use. Material design makes for a very slick-looking software experience without the need to theme. And if the size really bugs you, you can pair it with a smartwatch, so you don't need to take it out of a pocket as often. If you're considering a Nexus, you owe it to your wallet or your pocketbook to wait until the fall at this point. Even if the next generation devices don't do it for you, it's likely the Nexus 6 will see yet another price cut at that time. But if I needed, right now, to pick a tablet replacement phone that'd last me a while, the Nexus 6 would be even higher on my list than it was back in December. I really like it, and oddly, I like it a lot better than I did 7 months ago. Maybe I'll even use it to finally take the plunge and try Project Fi. But that's another topic for another video. For much more on the Nexus 6, check out our full review coverage at Pocketnow.com and see our more recent reviews here on YouTube. Also be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it, and thanks for watching. Till next time, this has been Michael Fisher with Pocketnow, Captain Two Phones on Twitter, encouraging you to leave your best bigger is better joke down in the comments. We'll see you next time.